Okay. I think it's recording. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Black Elk. I'm the Food Sovereignty Skills Educator at United Tribes Technical College, and I was asked by my friend Whitney Pierce with the Partnership for Native Americans to talk a little bit about medicinal teas. And you all might have received a kit actually containing some really amazing medicinal plants that you can use to make teas. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those plants specifically and different types of tea, and it's just going to be really fun. I actually am pre-recording this, so I won't be able to answer questions. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and let me know, and I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so I actually have some pictures and things to show you guys of the plants that you're going to be working with today. So I'm going to share my screen with you here. Let's see here. Okay. And let's start from the beginning, because that's always a good place to start. Okay, so these really are medicinal teas that you can use every day. They are teas that can be made a part of your daily life, and they're very safe. And if there are any sort of counterindications or things that you need to know, I will let you know as we go along with our talk. So the first tea that we're going to make is what we call a stay healthy tea. And it's both anti-inflammatory and immune boosting. Now, what does that mean? When a tea is anti-inflammatory, that means it reduces inflammation. So sometimes, like whether it's arthritis or allergies, things get sort of swollen up. In your body. So like when you get allergies, oftentimes your sinuses will get swollen. When you have arthritis, it's often your joints, maybe the joints in your hands or your hips or your knees, or sometimes even your shoulders are swollen. And so inflammation is actually the cause of a lot of health issues. And it's so nice to have a really good tea around to help to reduce that inflammation and relieve allergy symptoms or arthritis symptoms. And our recipe, you guys should all have with you some rose hips, some mint, and some stinging nettles. And I'm going to talk about each one of those plants separately just so you can learn a little bit about them. And so I'm going to go through both of these teas and the teas that we're going to make today. And I'm going to go over some directions. And then we'll actually get into making them, like the hands-on stuff, which is super fun. Okay, so one of the first ingredients in our tea is wild rose hips. Now, rose hips are just the berries off of the rose bush. So like if you have a rose bush in your yard, you may have noticed some red or even orangish berries growing on them, fruit, and those are called rose hips. You can see a really good photo of them here, the wild rose flower, but also the rose hips, of course, which come later on in the season. And I wanted to show you a picture of what a rose hip, a cross section of a rose hip, what it looks like when it's cut open, because you can see that the seeds of the rose are covered with tiny little hairs. And we'll talk about the significance of that in a second. Unjijintkahu is the Lakota name. I know not all of you are Lakota, but I thought that might come in handy. It's always good to try to learn the indigenous names of the plants where you live. And so I've worked really hard at that. My kids are also Lakota, so I like to use those names quite a bit. So Unjijintkahu is a shrub that grows all over the prairie. It grows on the edges of woodlands. This wild rose is actually very closely related to the cultivated rose bushes that you see in people's yards or that you see decorating various, more fancy gardens or more formal gardens. And you can use the rose hips off of those cultivated rose bushes in exactly the same way that you use the wild rose hips, okay? But this is a picture of the wild rose flower and wild rose hips. that grow on the prairies for the most part, where I live in North and South Dakota. And basically you wait until those rose hips turn red, which tends to happen in late summer, and you harvest them. You just pull them off of there. And before you use them for tea, you want to try to remove the seeds. Now, the rose hips that you guys got in your kits may or may not have the seeds removed. And if they don't have the seeds removed, I'll tell you how to deal with that in a second. But mine do. See these dried red rose hips, right, that already have the seeds removed? Why do you want to do that? Now, as I was saying, you can kind of see in that close-up photo that there are little sharp hairs attached to the seeds. Now, if you were to like eat some rose hips without removing the seeds, right, so eat those seeds and all, a few, maybe even a handful, wouldn't bother you too much. But if you ate too many of them, those hairs would start to bother your digestive system, if you know what I mean. I don't want to get too graphic, but you don't want a bunch of tiny little sharp hairs going through your digestive system, because that could get pretty itchy later. And there are actually traditional Lakota stories about Iktomi and him eating the rose hips, him eating too many rose hips without removing the seeds. So it's nice to remove the seeds, particularly if you're going to use the rose hips for food. Now, when you're eating rose hips, which you absolutely can do, you can put them in muffins. You can make a sauce, like a barbecue sauce out of them. A rose hip barbecue sauce would be delicious. Rose hips, you know, make really nice breads and things like that, sweet breads. Rose hips taste sort of like a cross between a cranberry and an apple. So they're kind of sour, kind of sweet, and really delicious. Now, removing those seeds before you make something like a muffin or a bread is really good, not just because of the hairs, but because the seeds tend to be tiny and kind of, you know, crunchy. So they don't have the best texture. But after you remove those seeds, you can, you know, use them as tea, use them in food, however you want. You can dry them and use them for later. They're really nice to have around. If you don't want to remove the seeds, let's say you're just going to use the rose hips for tea and you don't want to remove the seeds, that's fine. You just need to make sure you filter your tea really well. So you can put your whole rose hips into the, you know, the hot water that you're using, or into the pot of water that you're using, and you can make them into tea that way. But you want to make sure to filter it really well, maybe through a coffee filter, or as I'll show you later, maybe you're just using one of our fillable tea bags, which you guys might even have in front of you, okay? So as long as you're filtering it, you're fine not removing the seeds. But if you're going to use it for food, I suggest removing those. Rose hips are super high in vitamin C. Okay, so vitamin C is very well known to prevent and reduce incidences of infection. So oftentimes, like if someone is going through surgery, I'll recommend high doses of vitamin C, you know, a couple cups of rosehip tea per day, for example, every day for a week before they go through surgery, because rose hips are extremely high in vitamin C. And, you know, that helps to prevent post-surgical infection or any infections of, say, any incisions that they might be getting. So rose hips are, you know, help to boost the immune system, to keep you healthy. They prevent that infection. When I say they boost your immune system, I mean they, you know, are filled with that vitamin C, which of course allows your body to fight off viruses and even bacteria a lot more easily than it would otherwise. So not only are they great for their vitamin C content and their immune boosting properties, but they're also anti-inflammatory. So they help to reduce that inflammation. So you have the anti-inflammatory in this particular tea blend. You have the anti-inflammatory goodness of the of all of these plants, and so it's gonna, you know, they all build on top of each other. Okay, so this is the time when I would ask if anyone has any questions, but Since this is recorded, I can't answer yours. Okay, so that's the first ingredient in our Stay Healthy tea. We are also using stinging nettles in our Stay Healthy tea, okay? And here's some chopped up nettles that dried and chopped up. And nettles are a really amazing, amazing plant. Now you can see in that first photo there on your left that nettles are covered in tiny little sharp hairs. And those hairs are, you know, stinging nettle is aptly named, right? Because those little hairs actually do cause sort of a stinging feeling. Some people call it burnweed even in English, because they cause like this sort of stinging sensation on your skin. You know, they are, you know, the stems and the leaves are both covered with those little hairs, okay? However, nettles are an amazing medicine. They make a great tea, and you can also eat them, okay? Now, you're probably thinking, why would I want to put something in my body that's going to sting me? But the fact is, with any drying, with thorough drying of the plant, or with any cooking, all of the stinging effect goes away. So when you make a tea out of nettles, all the stinging effect goes away. If you decide to steam them or cook them down and use them in all kinds of recipes like nettle soup or nettle pesto, which is delicious, you know, or anything like that, maybe some sauces and things like that, all the stinging effect goes away, and you're just left with all the medicinal benefits of the nettles. I actually use nettles. I was always taught that if you pick nettles barehanded, don't wear gloves when you pick them, and let them sting you, that you'll never get arthritis in your hands, because that stinging effect is actually caused by medicines in the plant that help to reduce inflammation. There's that anti-inflammatory term again, help to reduce inflammation in your joints. So a lot of people will take fresh nettles and they'll actually rub them on their arthritic joints, whether it's their hands or their knees or their hips, and they'll reduce that inflammation. I did a lot of sports when I was younger, so my knees tend to ache as I get older. You know, sometimes what I'll do during the summer, the height of the summer months, when the stinging nettles are in their full stinging effect, I will put on a pair of shorts and I'll go run through a nettle patch and let all those nettles sting my legs. And sometimes I will be completely pain-free for 3 or 4 months. It's absolutely an amazing medicine. Unfortunately, that stinging effect will only take place when the plant is fresh, right? So you need to do that during the warmer summer months. Fortunately, however, during the winter months, you can always have your dried nettles around to use in the form of a tea. And they are still anti-inflammatory. It's more internally anti-inflammatory. So we'll talk more about nettles, but just to say, nettles make an amazing tea that is anti-inflammatory. Even if you have bad allergies or something like that, you can drink nettle tea and it'll help to reduce the sinus inflammation, you know, the nasal drainage. It'll help to reduce the inflammation that might be in your lungs and throat as a result of those allergies and allergic reactions. You know, also nettles are incredibly nutritious. They contain tons and tons of plant nutrients, what we call phytonutrients, tons of vitamins and things like that. And so they're great to eat. They're also really high in protein, so they make a really nice addition to soups and things like that. Adding them, you know, to all kinds of dishes is really nice. In particular, for people who might be trying to cut down on meat in their diet. That doesn't happen in indigenous communities very often. But if you know someone who might be a vegetarian or a vegan, nettles are a great addition to their diets. So, you know, just a fantastic plant all around. So not only are they medicinal, but they're edible as well. And fantastic part, they are, make a wonderful rope or cordage because there are fantastic strong fibers in the stems. So you can see the taller nettle plant on the right. Those small white tendrils that are hanging down are actually the nettle flowers, and those stems are filled with really strong fibers. So if you know how to process plants into fiber, you can make fantastic rope and cordage from nettles. I've even seen fishing nets that were made from nettle fibers. So such an amazing, amazing plant, and part of our tea blend today, our Stay Healthy tea blend. The third ingredient for our Stay Healthy tea blend is wild mint, also known as Chayaka. This species of wild mint, the particular species of wild mint that grows around where I live in the Dakotas, tends to be smooth and hairless. You can find some species of mint, some types of mint that are covered in little hairs, and that's fine too. You can actually use any type of mint for this tea blend. So maybe you grow some nice peppermint in your yard. That's totally fine. If you like to dry that and you'd rather use that for your tea blend, that's fine. If you go out and you collect wild mint and dry it yourself, the Chayaka, and you can see those beautiful dried mint leaves in the photo there, you're more than welcome to do that as well. If you maybe or a friend grows lemon balm in their yard. Lemon balm is the type of mint with a nice lemony flavor, and that has a lot of the same health properties as the wild mint that you see here in front of you. So you know, whichever species of mint you have a preference for, or whichever one you have handy, you can absolutely use in this tea blend. Wild mint isn't just used for its flavor. That's one of the reasons we're using it in this tea blend, but all of the mints have a lot of really wonderful medicinal properties. They aid in digestion. So if you're someone who has issues, digestive issues, if you're someone who has issues with acid reflux and indigestion, it makes a wonderful tea for you. Mint makes a wonderful tea for those symptoms. All the mints are also excellent lung support. They help to repair the lining of your blood vessels and airways. The mints help to open up breathing passages. They're anti-inflammatory, mildly anti-inflammatory. They taste great, of course. All the mints taste great. And yeah, they're just, you know, fantastic for the lungs. Mint is also actually really good for headaches and, you know, maybe inflammation in your temples. So if you're someone who's prone to migraines, you could start, and prone to headaches, you can start to incorporate wild mint tea or mint tea into your daily regimen. And it can cut down on the severity and also on the number, the incidences of headaches and migraines. Okay. So those are the 3 ingredients that are going into our Stay Healthy tea today. And I just wanted to give you some really nice background information on each of those. The other tea blend that we're going to be making today is a Breathe Easy tea. Now, as I said earlier, I actually am asthmatic. I also am prone to seasonal allergies, pollen and things like that. I'm also allergic to pet dander. And so having a really nice lung support tea around that I can use is really important. And it's very simple. It's just 2 ingredients. But this particular tea is anti-inflammatory, as with our Stay Healthy tea. But it's also, like I said, excellent lung support, helping not only to heal the lungs, but keep the lungs nice and strong and keep your breathing passages clear. And we're using stinging nettles and licorice root for this recipe. Now, we've already talked about nettles and how incredibly useful they are. Wonderful medicine, wonderful food, and also used as cordage. If you need some nettle recipes, you can actually Google, you know, stinging nettle pesto, stinging nettle pasta, stinging nettle soup. and you'll come up with a lot of really amazing recipes for incorporating them into your diet every day. What I love about that is that when you're eating, say you're eating stinging nettle pesto, right, which is a sort of a green pasta sauce. I think it has its origins in Italy originally. When you're eating nettle pesto, you're not just eating delicious food, you're also eating your medicine in a way that's really enjoyable. So medicinal pesto, right? That's fantastic. But we're talking about tea today. So the other ingredient for our Breathe Easy tea is licorice root, okay? And this is a species that grows all over the prairies. It's a beautiful plant. It can get quite tall and shrubby. And it has a yellow root with an aroma reminiscent of licorice, hence the name licorice root. And, you know, it's actually, there's another species of this plant that grows in Asia. So this plant is actually very commonly used in Chinese medicine as well as Native American medicine. And you can kind of see from the picture there of the roots that the roots are yellowish in color. And you can kind of see that. You guys probably have some licorice root sitting in front of you, but the root is a yellowish color. And if you smell it, you can kind of smell that licoricey, just very faint licoricey odor. The other thing that you might want to do, just so you can test it out, licorice root is incredibly sweet all on its own, right? So if you take a piece of your dried licorice root and you chew on it, within seconds, you'll detect that incredible licorice root sweetness. There are actually some companies that are investigating the use of licorice root as a sweetener, that sort of a substitute sweetener, right? One that's safe, but that won't raise your blood glucose levels. So kind of as a sugar substitute, right? It's actually kind of tasty. There is a little bit of bitterness on there, but what I always say to my students is that, you know, we're so conditioned to want everything that we eat and drink to either be sweet or salty, right? Think about the last time you ate a meal that, or ate some food that wasn't either sweet or salty. A lot of us really don't get a lot of meals in a day that aren't sweet or salty. But, you know, it's because we've forgotten about the incredible benefits of bitter flavors. I was always taught that bitter flavor, that's the medicine. And so if you are looking for medicinal plants, very often they'll have a little bit of a bitter flavor to them or a bitter aftertaste. So it's sort of an important flavor to condition yourself to and get used to, okay? And that this licorice root's a great example of that because it's sweet, but it's also a little bit bitter. Licorice root is an amazing plant for lung support and also for treating, you know, as I always say, an antihistamine. So if you've ever suffered from seasonal allergies, you know that sometimes you're forced to take an over-the-counter or maybe even a prescription antihistamine. Histamines are the little things that sort of get stuck in your sinus passages. Histamines cause inflammation, right? And so not only is licorice root an antihistamine, meaning it blocks those histamines, but it's also anti-inflammatory, just like the nettles. So it helps to reduce that inflammation and reduce all the terrible swelling that's caused by those histamines, by the allergens. Okay, so those are the two ingredients for our tea. Oh, I guess I should also say licorice root is not just used as an internal medicine, as a tea. It's not just used sort of as a sweetener or a sugar substitute. It's used a lot ceremonially. So when you're harvesting these plants, be really aware of how you're harvesting them. Make sure you're not taking too much. Make sure that you're following the protocols that are put in place by your ancestors. So if you were taught to put tobacco down, put your tobacco down when you harvest these. If you were taught to only take maybe 1 or 2 of each plant in an area, only take 1 or 2. Follow those protocols, follow those rules, and harvest these plants sustainably, because you're probably not the only person around who's using them, whether it's for food or medicine or ceremony or materials, okay? All right, so I also wanted to say that there are different types of tea. There are different ways to make tea. I'll go over some tools that I have sitting in front of me in a minute. But there are a couple of types of tea that I wanted to talk to you all about today. The first is an infusion. An infusion is a tea made from soft plant parts, okay? So things like leaves. Here's our nettle leaves, right? They're soft. Or flowers, okay? You know, flower petals are pretty soft. And when you're making an infusion, you add these softer plant parts to hot water and you let them sit or steep. That's a tea term. You let them sit for about 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how strong you want your tea to be, okay? Now, we also make what's called a decoction, and a decoction is a tea that's made from tougher plant parts, like seeds or bark or the roots of plants, and they're added directly to a boiling pot of water, and they're left to simmer and boil, you know, a low boil for about 10 minutes or so, depending on how strong you want your tea, and then you take them off the heat and you let them sit and steep for 5 to 15 minutes, okay? So there are different kinds of tea, different ways to make them, all right? So I have a picture here of some licorice root you can see in front of you with the brown sort of bark on it, and then also some rose hips. And the reason I put them up there is so that you could think about, okay, when you're making licorice root tea, are you making an infusion or a decoction? Right? You're making a decoction because it's tougher plant parts. And so we actually have some licorice root boiling right now to make our tea, to make our decoction. And it's the same way with rose hips, right? See, those are whole rose hips that don't have the seeds removed. And so we'll actually, if we had whole rose hips, we would actually boil those down to get the medicine, to really pull that vitamin C and that medicine out of them, and make a decoction out of them, okay? But when we have our wild mint and our nettles, right, softer plant parts, they're both the leaves of the plants, we're making an infusion, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing here. And we're actually going to make some tea right now. And there's a lot of different tools that you can use to make tea. A lot of you might have some fillable tea bags in front of you. They come in all different sizes. So you could use this one to make like maybe a cup or 2 of tea. And then you could use the larger one to make a whole pot of tea, right? Totally depending on you. Now, I love these fillable tea bags, drawstring. They're so fun and easy to use, and you get to really decide what you want to put in here. So let's say that you really like the Stay Healthy tea blend that we're using, you know, the mint, the nettles, and the rose hips, but you really like to have a lot of mint in there. You know, you can decide on that. As you get to know these recipes better, you can tweak them to your own preferences. So if you like more mint, add more mint to that recipe, okay? So that's what's fun about these, because you can really decide, and they make great gifts. So think about like if you put a cute little box of 10 of these fillable tea bags together and gave them to someone with a note describing the type of tea, what's in it, and what it's used for. What a great gift that would be, right? Especially for an elder in your life, or someone who might have a hard time keeping their lungs healthy. Fantastic gift to give someone. You can also use various tea, what we call tea balls or tea infusers. They come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. This particular one is fun. You know, you just fill your cup with hot water. Let's say you have your tea blend in here, and you just put it in there and you let it steep for a while. This is great when you're making an infusion, right? And they also come in these sort of tea balls. that have a little switch that you open. Oh, sorry, right? And so you put your tea in there, you close it up, you close the lock over it. At least that's the theory. Okay, you close that, and then you put that in you put the tea ball into your cup. And oftentimes it'll have like a little hook that you can hook onto the side, okay? And then you, again, making an infusion, these are great. You just let them sit for a while. I have another type of tea infuser. Can you see? This almost looks, oh no, you can kind of see there, right? This is a cup infuser. And so you have your cup of hot water, you have your tea blend in here, and you set it into your cup, okay? Or you can have the hot water in there, put this in, and then you can just start adding stuff to this if you want, adding various herbs and fruits and things like that to this, and let it infuse into your hot water. So these are great as well. And you can find these all over online, okay? So there's all kinds of different tools, you know, again, the tea bags, the cup infuser, and different types of tea balls that you can use, okay? All right, so now let's get to actually making our tea blends. You're gonna need a clean bowl or a clean jar with a lid, okay? It doesn't have to be, this is a quart jar, doesn't have to be quite this big, but I use quart jars a lot when I'm making my tea blends. So, so go ahead and find yourself a clean jar or a bowl for now, or even a baggie. If that's what you have sitting around, a Ziploc bag works just fine, okay? And to your bag, bowl, or jar, you're going to add, I have my half cup measuring cup right here, okay? And first we're gonna make that Stay Healthy tea blend, okay? So to my jar, I'm going to add half a cup of rose hips, okay? Half a cup of rose hips. I'm going to add half a cup of nettles, and I'm going to add half a cup of mint. That mint smells so good. I love that smell, okay? So half a cup of our mint, all right? So I have all of those in my jar. Now I'm just gonna put my clean lid onto my jar, and I'm going to gently roll it around. You can shake it if you want, just to mix them together, okay? And try to get those rose hips, the mint, and the nettles incorporated throughout, okay? And bam, we have our amazing Stay Healthy tea blend here. I can make as much of it as I want. If I'm giving a gift to someone, I can make a jar of this, put a nice little ribbon on here, and you know, maybe get a tea ball for them and give this to them, just like this, right? And tell them, I want you to stay healthy, right? I want you to stay well. It's a fantastic blend. Remember, anti-inflammatory and immune boosting. So great for anyone who might be prone to, you know, during cold season, maybe prone to the common cold, prone to catching the flu. This is a great tea blend for them, okay? And you know what? I think actually I want a cup of tea. So I'm gonna take our Stay Healthy tea blend that we made just now, and I'm gonna use this particular infuser. And I am going to just reach into my jar here. It's about if you don't have a tea ball, it's about 1.5 teaspoons of your tea blend for 2 cups of very hot water. Okay, when you're making an infusion. Okay, and then I'm gonna place my little stem back on there. I'm gonna put this in my cup, and here I have just some plain hot water that I'm gonna pour into here. Okay, This is about, these larger coffee cups are about 2 cups, okay? And I'm just gonna let that infuse for about 10 or 15 minutes. And bam, I'll have a beautiful cup of that Stay Healthy tea blend. Remember, that's the rose hips, the stinging nettles, and the wild mint. Beautiful, okay? I could drink 2 to 3 cups of that a day, and it would really help with the inflammation and boosting my immune system, okay? The other tea blend that we're making, again, I'll grab a clean jar with a lid, is the Breathe Easy tea, right? That lung support tea. And for that, I'm gonna use about half a cup of stinging nettles. You can use more nettles if you want. Nettles are just so easy and you know, safe. Okay, so half a cup of nettles and half a cup of licorice root. Okay, I can make a much larger quantity of this if I want. I'm gonna add put my lid on there, give it a few shakes, and bam, I'm done. I have my Breathe Easy tea. It's that simple. Okay, now if you are going out and getting these plants yourself, obviously you're gonna have to learn to identify them, you're gonna have to learn to harvest them, and then you're gonna have to learn to dry them. I tend to like dry things on cookie sheets all over my house. I just lay them out on cookie sheets and let them air dry. In the Dakotas, we live in a really dry climate, so it's kind of easy to dry plants in your home. And then of course you can decide if you wanna crush them up, if you wanna break them up or chop them up before or after, but you know, really easy to do that, to start from the very beginning of the process. These plants are available for purchase, like online, from various vendors like Mountain Rose Herbs, Star West Botanicals, Frontier Herb Co-op. And you know, you can purchase them, but what I really urge you to do is to learn to identify these plants, learn their names, learn what they look like, develop a relationship with them over time. I know that's hard to do in the beginning, and a lot of you might actually not live in a place where you can get out and harvest these plants, and that's understandable too. But it's really important to try to develop a relationship with even one plant, you know, even if you develop a relationship with dandelions, for example. Okay, so really, it's really important. So because when you're taking this tea into your body, when you have a relationship with these plants, it's a different kind of healing, right? So here we have our Breathe Easy tea and we have our Stay Healthy tea. And I'm just going to label these, right? Because I don't want to get them mixed up. And you think you're going to remember what's in them, but believe me, that gets kind of tough, okay? So you want to try as much as possible to label them accurately. So this is my Stay Healthy tea blend. See, I almost labeled it wrong right there. I just wrote on some tape what the ingredients are. The nettles, the rose hips, and the mint. And I'm just gonna put that on my jar, okay? I could take a permanent marker and write directly on the jar or on the lid if I wanted, but I tend to put it on tape. And bam, I can keep that on my cupboard. This tea blend will last for like 6 months as long as I keep it clean and dry and in a darker place, not out in the sun. Yeah, labeling my Breathe Easy tea as well with nettles and licorice root. Okay, and again, I can keep that on in my cupboard too. Now, when you're making a decoction like this, I wanted to show you all about 20 minutes ago, my husband started some licorice root tea on the stove. He started boiling it and let it boil for about 10 minutes to make a decoction. And you can see how dark that licorice root tea, that decoction got. And so we let that sit and boil on the stove. And then he poured it into this cup for me with the licorice root. There's actually licorice root in the bottom of the cup here and all. And we've let it sit and steep there for about another 10 minutes or so, okay? And that is our decoction. So that takes a little longer. Making a decoction is a little more involved because you actually boil the plant parts, simmer them for 5 to 10 minutes, you know, depending on how strong you want your tea. And then you let them sit and steep for a little while, and it gets even stronger. Okay, and you're basically letting it cool off. Okay, so my Stay Healthy tea blend has been steeping for a little while. Oh yeah, it looks fantastic. The water has changed color, and I can actually take this out. I could still, because there's about 1.5 teaspoons of my tea blend in here, I could probably make another cup of tea with this later. So I'm gonna set this aside and save it. Start drinking that. Oh, it's so good. You get the slight sweetness from the rose hips. You get that beautiful mintiness from the wild mint, and you get this sort of savory greenness, green flavor from the nettles. But you know, you can almost immediately feel it start nourishing you. Okay, I hope that if you guys have any questions, you'll contact me and let me know. Just to review really quickly, we made 2 types of tea today. We made a Stay Healthy tea blend with rose hips, mint, and nettles. And we made a Breathe Easy lung support tea blend with those same stinging nettles and licorice root. Okay, those are both beautiful types of tea, anti-inflammatory, immune boosting, lung support. Great to keep them both on hand. Both are teas that you can drink every day. We also talked about different tools that we can use for making tea, like this cup infuser that fits right into your teacups. We talked about these tea balls, various tea balls, and we talked about the tea bags. Okay. Oh, and if you wanted to make some of these tea bags, you just take 1.5 teaspoons of your tea blend. Okay. And I can actually use this to measure. Or if you have a teaspoon measure, you can use that too. But just take 1.5 teaspoons of your tea blend and add it to each tea bag. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. You don't want to overfill these tea bags, because remember, when you put it in the water, it's actually going to expand. So I have some hot water left over in this cup, and I'm just going to add this tea bag. Okay. I could even put the lid on if I want. And I'm going to let that infuse for about 10 minutes. And it's that simple. Okay. You can keep the tea bags around in a tightly sealed jar if you want, or you can just keep the tea blends around if you want. Okay. It's totally personal preference, whatever is easiest for you, or whatever is easiest for the people that you're working with. If I'm working with an elder, I would probably give them a jar of or a box of the tea bags, because then all they have to do is take one bag out of the jar or out of the box, and they can add it to their 2 cups of hot water and let it sit, infuse for a little while, and they're done. Okay. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really fun to do, even without an audience. I hope you enjoy the information that's in here. If you have any questions, please contact me. Linda Black Elk signing off.